It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer go head-to-head, clashing in the first live debate of the election campaign.
The plan is working, of course I know. Everyone is only just starting to feel the benefits of it, but inflation is back to normal, wages are growing.
I meet so many people who are struggling with their bills, and the Prime Minister just keeps saying he lives in a different world.
We'll be live in Salford to get the reaction to that debate, which is just wrapping up, and we'll have the first poll with who has come out on top. Also tonight, 2 arrests have been made after Nigel Farage gets hit with a milkshake in Clacton as he launches his campaign for the Reform Party. And the Conservatives and Labour promise to cap legal migration as Reform puts it front and centre of its campaign. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's coming up in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello there, good evening. Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer have been going head-to-head in their first TV debate of this election campaign. At times, it was tense between the two leaders. They discussed the NHS strikes, immigration, the cost of living, taxes and their own upbringing. Tonight, we'll bring you the latest reaction to that debate on ITV and reveal who was the winner tonight. Sky's Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, has tonight's first report.
Very good to see you. Thank you for having me. A Prime Minister in need of a knockout blow. And the man who just needs to survive the bout unscathed.
Ready? All good? Very good, yeah.
The two men head-to-head on the debate stage for the first time, addressing an audience in Salford, but the country beyond their real target.
I'm seeking your backing to change our country, to make it work once again for you and your family.
You know what I would do? I'll cut your taxes, protect your pension and reduce immigration.
The cost of living, the first topic from a voter struggling to pay their bills.
My priority has always been to do what I can to support you. Our economy is growing again, wages are rising and crucially, we are able to now start cutting your taxes. But I know you're only just starting to see the benefits of that as you described.
Well, he says the plan is working. He says the plan is working. So the question for him is, why has he called the election now? He's called it now because he knows, and I'll ask him this, he knows inflation is going to go back up. He knows energy prices are going to go back up in the autumn. That's what he's not telling you.
This is the choice for everybody. The plan is working, of course I know. Everyone is only just starting to feel the benefits of it.
I meet so many people who are struggling with their bills, and the Prime Minister just keeps saying he lives in a different world.
The two leaders trading blows from the off and hard to control.
Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer, I am going to draw a line under this part of the debate.
TV debates have been pivotal in the past. Rishi Sunak desperately needs to change the course of this race. The NHS, the next battleground. The PM had pledged to get waiting lists down.
We went through the best part of 2 years where the NHS couldn't conduct all the treatments it normally would, and it is going to take time to recover from that. But we are now making progress. The waiting lists are coming down.
7.2 million, they're now 7.5 million. I'd like you to explain how they're coming down.
Because they were coming down from where they were when they were higher.
7.2.
And they're now on their way down.
That's the first laugh of the night.
Yes, because
tax policy, a key theme of this campaign so far. But are they really that different?
Please raise your hand if I am wrong. You, as Prime Minister, will not raise income tax. You will not raise national insurance in the next Parliament. And other than Labour on private schools, you will not raise VAT.
One area where they certainly disagree, immigration. Labour says it would end flights taking migrants to Rwanda.
if I'm your Prime Minister, the planes will go to Rwanda, we will have a deterrent. So the simple question for Keir Starmer is, what will you do with people who come here illegally? What will you do with them? Well, very simply, what will you do with them? That's what I'm going to do. We'll have a deterrent. What are you going to do?
We need to smash the gangs that are running this vile trade, making a huge amount of money, putting some of the most vulnerable people in boats.
We do need to smash the gangs. Keir Starmer voted against those laws. So, as ever, you say one thing here, but your track record says something completely different, and you can't be trusted to tackle immigration.
Rishi Sunak in attack mode.
Okay.
What are you going to do? Just tell everybody. What are you going to do with illegal migrants who
Rishi Sunak,
arrive?
please, can we please, gentlemen, we will lower our voices.
For over an hour, both men went at one another. It was scratchy and tetchy, but quickly a pattern emerged. Rishi Sunak says that his opponent doesn't have a plan, while Keir Starmer said that his opponent made things worse.
In just a few minutes, the battle to claim victory in this debate begins, but the true verdict will only come a month from today.
Well, we'll be live in the spin room with a YouGov poll, which will tell us who came out on top, plus all the reaction. That's in just a moment. First, though, the campaigning continued around the country today. The Home Secretary, James Cleverly, was in Rochester for the Conservatives, pitching his party's plans for a cap on worker and family visas. And Sir Keir Starmer attempted to reassure voters that his party would also tackle immigration. But it was Nigel Farage, the newcomer to the campaign, who attracted big crowds in Clacton in Essex today and some unwanted attention. 2 people were arrested after the Reform candidate was hit by a milkshake. Sky's political correspondent Rob Powell has this report.
A campaign launch that was always likely to be eventful. 2 people were arrested after Nigel Farage had a milkshake thrown over him while leaving a pub in Clacton. Earlier, parts of the East Coast resort ground to a halt as the Reform leader began his campaign to become the local MP.
The Conservatives have betrayed that trust. They've opened up the borders to mass immigration like we've never seen before.
Hundreds of people crowded near to the pier in the town often known as the birthplace of Brexit.
He's not a racist.
Yes, he is.
The controversial politician bringing debate and division to the Essex seaside.
We're entitled to...
I'm not being rude, nothing. So you're all for mass immigration?
Campaigning further south in Kent, the Home Secretary visibly trying to address those concerns. James Cleverly proposing a migration cap that would see MPs vote on the number of work and family visas that could be issued each year.
The Tories have broken so many promises to bring down migration. Why on earth should voters believe you now?
So we have seen a 10% fall in legal migration because of the actions that I've taken with the full support of the Prime Minister since becoming Home Secretary. We've seen the visa routes that have created the largest influx of people. Those applications are down by 25% because of the action that we have taken.
But with electoral threats on all sides, will that be enough?
The Tory campaign has so far been geared around more traditional Conservative policies like national service, pensioner tax breaks and now a tougher immigration system. But with Nigel Farage back, there will likely be pressure to move further to the right to try and stop voters switching to support reform.
Making a low-key entrance to meet pensioners in Bolton, it's Sir Keir Starmer who stands to benefit from a surge in support for reform. But Labour know they need to reassure voters on immigration, so it's no surprise they're also taking a spiky tone.
We need a skills strategy in this country so we don't have to have so many people arriving on work visas, and we have to hammer down on bad bosses who aren't complying with Labour standards, and we would ban them from recruiting people from abroad.
Thanks, Nigel.
We've seen this one before. A decade after Nigel Farage's old party took Clacton in a by-election, many of the issues concerning voters here haven't changed, and neither has this man's ability to draw a crowd. Rob Powell, Sky News.
And here is a list of the candidates declared so far in the Clacton constituency, one we will be sure to be watching on election night. Well, let's go live then to our deputy political editor, Sam Coates. And Sam, 14 years since the first ever UK TV election debates, they are back. We are expecting a YouGov snap poll shortly. But what does the mood music say there in the spin room after tonight's testy exchanges?
Well, Anna, the debate only finished a couple of minutes ago. Rishi Sunak concluded by telling the nation, "I have always got your back."
Keir Starmer concluded his contribution to this ITV debate by asking, how would you feel if the Tories won on election morning? And that is the summary of some of the arguments that they've been using over the last 60 minutes. Over an hour, the two men who have been separated on the campaign trail for a couple of weeks now really went at each other. You could feel the frustration at one another in the room as they sniped and at times in testy exchanges went at one another. There was, as I was saying, a clear pattern. Rishi Sunak wanted to say that Keir Starmer had no plan. Keir Starmer very clear that he wanted to impress on the voters at home that things had got worse both under Rishi Sunak's premiership and under the last 14 years. Time and again, the ITV host, Julie Etchingham, having to stand in and calm things down. At points you couldn't hear what was going on as the two men talked at each other and refused to bow to the moderator. The clear pattern from Keir Starmer was to say, kept coming back to this, that he felt that Rishi Sunak wouldn't have called the election if things are as good, for instance, on the economy or on migration, as he claims. He said inflation could go up again, bills could go up again over the next few months. That's one of the reasons why Rishi Sunak has called the election now. Waiting lists he got mocked for by Keir Starmer. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak attempted time and again to grill Keir Starmer over the differences between the two men. He wanted to land a point that taxes would go up under a Labour government. He kept using this figure of £2,000, which Keir Starmer did describe as garbage, but never went into any detail as to why that figure was garbage. The most successful moment, I thought, for Rishi Sunak was his attempt to put Keir Starmer on the spot over specifics, particularly over what Keir Starmer would do to end the doctor strike. He said that he would get in the room and negotiate, but no clear path for what that would look like. I thought one of the most successful moments for Keir Starmer was when he mocked Rishi Sunak over waiting lists and the claim that waiting lists had come down. Rishi Sunak said that. Keir Starmer questioned over the time frame. So I'm going to pause there, Anna, because we can now bring you the results of the first YouGov Snap debate poll. And here they are. YouGov Snap debate poll that's just been released has Rishi Sunak, and the question is, leaving aside your party preference, who do you think performed best overall in tonight's debate? 51% say Rishi Sunak performed better. 49% say Keir Starmer performed better. So just by the narrowest of margins, Rishi Sunak comes out on top of Keir Starmer. And I can bring in now Patrick English from YouGov. He's just completed the poll. Patrick, what does it tell us?
So I think this is a very interesting result. The public are very clearly split on who won this debate. And if you're Rishi Sunak, I think that that's quite a good thing, considering the MRP poll we put out yesterday suggested Labour on course for a landslide. Keir Starmer's best Prime Minister ratings are much better than Sunak's. I think he'd look at that and say, well, this is quite good for me. However, perhaps it's not quite the knockout blow that he might be looking for to really turn this campaign around. And of those 1,600 debate watchers that we've polled in this Snap poll, 15% of those who voted for the Conservatives in 2019 said that Keir Starmer was. There's still bad signs for the Prime Minister in this, but certainly I think probably, looking at the vote intention polls, looking at the MRP poll, Rishi Sunak can look at that and say, well, I performed quite well there.
So if it is 50-50 in this poll, 51-49 in favour of Rishi Sunak, would you expect that then to start moving the dial in the coming days? Or do you think that that kind of ambivalence means, actually, given the scale of Labour's lead, they'll be pretty happy with this?
Certainly not a knockout blow being split. And what I would expect is that perhaps as this news filters through, as people look at the highlights and they think more about what the leader said, perhaps we might see more Conservative 2019 voters going, well, hang on, OK, maybe this guy isn't so bad, maybe I can trust him, maybe we can go back to the column. So to seismic movements, perhaps not, but certainly this might be a little bit of a boost for Sunak. He's really sort of come out of this fight, at least even Stevens with Keir Starmer, having gone into it well behind in the polls, well behind on Best Prime Minister, and well behind on MLP projections.
And when can we see in the polls whether or not this has shifted the dial? How long will that take to feed through?
I think a little while. It's important to know that, of course, not a lot of people were watching the debate tonight, so we're going to have to wait to see if the news to filter through. I'd say let's check back in the polls maybe in 3 or 4 days and see if there's been any real movement, any positive signs, any shoots of Conservative recovery in a few days' time.
Patrick, thank you very much indeed. There you have it. So the public broadly 50-50 split. 51% say that they thought that Rishi Sunak performed better. 49% felt that that Keir Starmer performed better. Anna.
Yes, and fascinatingly, they're fighting, of course, from different positions, aren't they? You know, famously, people say Sir Keir Starmer is carrying a Ming vase over a minefield in this campaign and the months that preceded it, whereas Rishi Sunak is fighting a rearguard action, needing to throw the punches. I understand that Michael Gove has just walked into the spin room. Thumbs up. Do they think it went well?
They do, I suspect, think that it went well. They will be pleased with the attempt that they are making to drive home specific messages. There must have been dozens of occasions in that debate where Rishi Sunak tried to press home to voters that Labour will raise your taxes. But there was a key moment in this debate, Anna, when Juliet Chingham, the ITV host, asked both candidates whether or not that they would consider raising income tax, national insurance and VAT, and basically said she believed that they wouldn't, to raise their hands if they had any plans to do so. You can see in that actually the broad sweep of taxes. The Labour Party and the Tory Party have broadly similar positions. Rishi Sunak very keen to drive home that pensioners may end up paying more. One of the big attacks from the Prime Minister in the last hour was to say that the basic state pension may end up being caught by income tax because the Tories are planning to raise thresholds and protect the basic state pension, whereas Labour couldn't. And I think the strategy of the Labour Party is to sidestep difficult questions, but the strategy of the Tories is in essence, I think, to try and push Labour and see whether or not they'll rule out or evade key questions. I think the difficulty for Keir Starmer in this debate is where he didn't give specifics, and I think on that question about how he might resolve the strikes with the junior doctors, on the question of what he would do about pensioners, on the question on several questions, it was that lack of specific that I think may well be noticed by the public. However, the record that he kept driving home of the last 14 years and the last couple of years with Rishi Sunak, I think he believes, and I think the Labour Party has tested using focus groups, they believe that will help convince voters that it's time for a change, which was at the heart of the message that Keir Starmer was trying to land with voters today.
Yes, and on the junior doctors' strike, the retort from Rishi Sunak just saying, I'll resolve it, is not a plan. The theme, as you suggested, that emerged throughout this. Immigration, Sam, another hotly debated topic, thrust to centre stage today too. Here's how Sir Keir Starmer quizzed Rishi Sunak about his plan on that.
Why are the numbers this year 10,000 record numbers? Why is that?
Because this is a challenge. This is a growing challenge, but I've got a plan to deal with it because I'm going to put people on planes. What are you going to do with them? I can tell everyone what I'm going to do. You might not like it, but I've got a plan because we've got to have a deterrent. What are you going to do? Just tell everybody. What are you going to do with illegal migrants who arrive?
And the message from Sir Keir Starmer on this is that I can tackle the people smugglers, he said, because I tackled terrorists in my previous job.
That's right. It's interesting on migration. That's where there are a couple of different areas where there are clear differences between the party leaders. On Rwanda, Keir Starmer absolutely clear he would scrap it, allowing Rishi Sunak to drive home the idea that Labour wouldn't have a deterrent. Although interesting, Anna, that Keir Starmer said, well, I might be up for migrants being processed in third countries, so processed in overseas locations, although he rules out the Rwanda scheme, providing that it
conforms to international law. A second difference that I thought came across in that debate was the division over the possibility, but not a commitment, from the Conservatives to leave the European Convention of Human Rights and human rights courts if the Tories come in. Basically, Rishi Sunak is saying, look, if foreign courts or the Strasbourg court does try and block my Rwanda plan, then I won't hesitate to take action and pull out of some of those conventions and the jurisdiction of that court. Keir Starmer absolutely clear that he is not willing to do that. And I think that dividing line is something that both men are happy to press on. Much of it, both men were trying to fight on different terrain, with Rishi Sunak trying to talk about the future, Keir Starmer trying to dwell on the past and the current situation. But on the specific areas of difference, I thought that was one of the more notable points where both leaders were prepared to advertise their parties' different policies.
Sam, for the moment, thanks very much indeed. Certainly immigration, one of the central themes of that leaders' debate. Central theme, as I said today, also for the Conservatives pushing a cap on worker and family visas. Our data editor, Ed Conway, has been taking a closer look at how net migration has changed over the years. Let's take a look.
Immigration, it's one of those issues that basically all of the party leaders like to talk about when it comes to an election. But there's lots of misconceptions about what's going on with migration. One of them is, isn't it all about small boats? Well, actually, it's not. Obviously, that's a visible part of it. But when you look at the numbers, the number of people coming across in small boats last year, it was just under 30,000. OK, it's very high historically, but still compare that to, for instance, the total number of asylum seekers. That's a lot higher, 81,000. Compare it to the number of people coming in to study. That is far, far higher, 379,000. And the number of people coming into work is even higher still, over 400,000. And when you toss up basically everything, you're talking about well over 1 million people coming into the country, of which small boats is really only a small proportion. However, the totals are indeed very big indeed. And when we look back through history, this is kind of going back, looking at population-adjusted migration flows. Anything above the line is more people coming in than going. Anything below the line is the other way around. And we're going back to 1855 here. And what I want you to focus on is over here. Just look at this. In the last couple of years, look at what happens to this line. It goes up to totally unprecedented levels. It's never been that high before. So this is certainly a big issue and one that all of the party leaders, as I say, want to talk about. Rishi Sunak, we just heard from him. He said the plan is working, but migration levels are still too high, so we're going further. We have a clear plan to stop the boats. We heard about that a second ago. Numbers not that big compared with the rest of it. And put a legal cap, this is perhaps the important thing, a legal cap on numbers. So he hasn't said what the cap is actually going to be. One person who thinks he knows what the cap should be, it's this man, it's Nigel Farage. He thinks net migration should be zero. So this is the net zero he actually rather likes. But it raises a question, OK? So first of all, do these caps ever actually work? And this is showing you quite a famous cap. So this is the David Cameron cap. This is showing you net migration, so the bars above the line showing that's more people coming in than going. He wanted to keep net migration in the tens of thousands. Did that work? Well, have a look at the bars. No, it didn't. No year, apart from this is the kind of COVID year, was it below the bar. And by then, actually, Boris Johnson had basically got rid of that cap. He brought in his own rules, points-based immigration system, and, of course, famously, the post-Brexit rules come into force. This was the response to Brexit. What did it do? Those rules came in, and look at the bars. They went up higher than ever before. Final thing, though, can you actually have net zero migration? You might have thought no, looking at this chart, but let's just kind of rewind back through history, go back even further and have a look at this. Actually, there have been some incidents where you had more people leaving the country than entering, not that long ago. So 1992, 93, the UK had a recession. A lot of people left. There were high interest rates, high unemployment. They got out of the country. So that was net zero migration, as it were. 1988, freedom of movement. A lot of people went into the EU. They moved across to the EU as well. But more broadly, it's this period here that's striking. There's a post-war period, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, where loads more people actually left the country than coming in. Why? Because the economy wasn't that attractive. The people were worried about this at the time. There was a post-war brain drain. So you can certainly get net zero migration. It just might not be for the reasons that you're hoping for.
Well, I'm joined now by Liz Kendall, Labour's Shadow Work and Pension Secretary. Liz, I wonder what you made of that debate. It was a rather unedifying watch with the two men squabbling and talking over them. I mean, do you think anybody can really claim to be the winner?
I think that Rishi Sunak constantly talking over Keir, I think won't have gone down well with lots of people who want to listen to it. Look, you know, I think from the first question about struggling with the cost of living to the last question about how can we provide real hope for young people, I think Keir set out a really positive message of change for the country. That's so important because a lot of people don't believe that change is possible. After the last 14 years, everything they've been promised, all those times they've been let down, and our big challenge is to show people that change is possible. But if you want change, you've got to vote for it, and I thought Keir set that out really well today, talking directly to the public, understanding their concerns. I think that was one of the main things he did was to connect with people about what their real worries are, to show them a different way as possible.
But what Keir Starmer did was to focus more or less entirely on the record of the Conservatives. The last 14 years, the last couple of years under Rishi Sunak, his pitch wasn't so much about him, it was about what the Tories have done to the country. And so we didn't learn a great deal about the man that might be Prime Minister.
Well, I don't agree with that. I think he was really clear about how our plans to tackle the cost of living, to cut NHS waiting times, to create clean power, and to give young people a real shot at life. But it's also right to say, you know, if you want to judge who's the best person to run the country for the next 5 years, look at their record over the last 14 years. You know, Rishi Sunak doesn't want to stand on his record because it's a record of failure and of chaos and decline. So I think it's right we hold them to account for that, but also to set out our plans for the future. And that's what Keir did. I think a lot of people are still undecided, and those are the people Keir was speaking to tonight.
But I was listening very closely to Keir Starmer, and there were several points in which he was pressed for an answer, but I didn't really think I got a satisfactory one. So take the question, and this was something that Rishi Sunak pressed him on how would you resolve the doctor's strike? Labour's answer simply seems to be, we'll get around the table. Well, but that's not an answer to that question.
It actually is, because when we were last in government, we never had a national strike. We had lots of difficult challenges in the NHS, and that is how you deal with that. You sit down, you negotiate. That is a real answer, and the reason I know that was I was working in the department some of the time, and I saw how that worked. But
the result of you sitting around the table is that Labour ended up paying more in wages, and the debt ended up rising. So if you sit around the table, you end up giving in. Isn't that what's going to end up happening in order to stop?
The result of what we did was the lowest waiting times on record and the highest patient satisfaction. I mean, I remember we came in, you had to wait over 18 months for your treatment. When we left office, it was a maximum 18 weeks. We ended it. And part of that was working with stuff. So he did answer the question. You might not have liked the answer, but he did give it.
Final thing. YouGov say that 51% thought that Rishi Sunak did best, 49% said that Keir Starmer did best. Are you surprised at that score?
I think, actually, we came into here in a strong position. I think we leave in an even stronger position. But I've never believed the polls, not even your fantastic polls you've been talking. I don't. There's lots of undecided people, and we've got to go out every day, win their support by saying change is possible. But if you want change, you've got to vote for it.
Liz Kendall, thank you very much indeed. Remember, Anna, given the polls, which some believe and some, like Liz Kendall, don't, it is, at the moment, looking like this race is Keir Starmer's to lose. It was for Rishi Sunak to pull something unexpected out of the bag. He may just about have edged it amongst some voters. But the question, I think, right now is that enough?
Absolutely fascinating. For the moment, Sam, thanks very much indeed. As you discussed there, health came up to Sir Keir Starmer pushing Rishi Sunak about his claim that waiting lists were coming down for the more than 7 million still awaiting treatment on the NHS. And the Prime Minister then challenging Sir Keir Starmer on what his solution would be to the ongoing NHS doctor strikes.
So you're not going to give them the 35% pay rise that they're asking for, so how would you resolve it? Just standing there and saying, I'll resolve it, isn't an answer. That's not a plan.
Prime Minister.
How would you resolve it?
Prime Minister, your record is...
No, how would you resolve it? You want to be Prime Minister, How would you resolve the strike? How would you resolve them?
I wish he had as much to say when Liz Truss was crashing the economy.
Could you answer Rishi Sunak's point, please, Keir Starmer?
Well, I will when I can get a word in edgeways. His record is of saying, I'm not going to get in the room to negotiate. And what have we got?
We've been in the room to negotiate.
What have we got? Ongoing
Let him
strikes.
answer.
We have to end these strikes.
How?
The grown-up way to do that is to get in the room and to negotiate with the doctors and come to a settlement. There's only two ways forward. One is a continuing strike, which is what we've had for a very, very long time. We're now 4.5 weeks from election. He's going to kick it into the long grass.
Right.
Or you get grown up, you go in the room and you resolve this. That does not mean you agree with the 35% we can't afford.
Thank you.
And interesting, Sam, that reaction seems to suggest that people felt Sir Keir Starmer was often on the defensive, having not been in power, and 14 years of Tory rule.
That's right. Time and again, Keir Starmer took it back to that question of the last 14 years, asking and particularly driving home the point that he claimed the NHS was in a significantly worse situation today than it was when the Conservatives and David Cameron came to power in 2010. And also, I think, tried to personalise the argument around the NHS, pointing out that he would never use private healthcare, and also saying that his mum was a nurse, his wife works in a big hospital in the NHS, in order to underscore his credentials. I think one of the moments that Labour will be most pleased with was a moment where Keir Starmer challenged Rishi Sunak on the waiting list statistics, which have gone up over the period of his premiership, even if they've gone down. Rishi Sunak would say that higher figure is because of industrial action, which led to the exchange that you just saw. But the difficult thing for Keir Starmer is that was, I think, one of three areas that I identified where we didn't completely get to the bottom of where Rishi Sunak and where Rishi Sunak's questions what the answers were from Keir Starmer. Rishi Sunak's big point to Keir Starmer dozens of times was that taxes will rise by £2,000. Keir Starmer didn't thoroughly really rebut that, and he also had a moment where he was pressed on whether or not pensioners could face a tax rise, and he sidestepped that as well, sort of indicating that that might happen. But let's listen to a bit of Keir Starmer on his riff of 14 years, the last 14 years of rule, which clearly Labour think is a big election-winning theme over the next few weeks.
You've had 14 years with nothing to do but think about the future, but you have nothing to say about it, and all you can do is talk about the past. And it's clear there are no big ideas here. If we want to transform our country for the better and deliver a secure future, you've got to have leaders who are prepared to do big, bold things.
Rishi
I am.
Not saying you're stuck in the past, Keir Starmer.
On the one hand, he says these are all the big ideas that Keir Starmer's coming up with, and they'll cost a fortune. Then he says he hasn't got any big ideas. I do appreciate why he doesn't want to talk about the last 14 years. He's ashamed of the last 14 years.
I'm joined by Michael Gove, the outgoing Levelling Up Secretary. Michael Gove, Rishi Sunak needed to do something tonight to transform the race. Whatever you thought of that debate, he didn't do that, did he?
Yes, it did. It exploded Keir Starmer's claim to be a credible candidate for Prime Minister on migration, on the doctor's strike, on tax, on the economy, on every single area that he was questioned on. Starmer was found wanting. When he was specifically pressed on the economy, he said, look, I'm not going to go into the details. He can't. And then, what's supposed to be his flagship policy on climate, he said that this great idea of his great British energy, this new Quango, would generate energy. No, it won't. That is not Labour policy. Ed Miliband will have been watching this with his head in his hands as his own leader can't even recall what their climate policy is, and Ed Miliband must have been thinking, why didn't I stay on as leader? I'd have done better than that.
Keir Starmer, at the beginning, made the point that Rishi Sunak has called this election now because far from things getting better, there is a chance that they could get worse. Energy bills could rise, inflation could be going up again. He's right, isn't he?
No. What Rishi did in calling the election was force us to have this debate. And we saw tonight the clear contrast between the Prime Minister, who has a clear plan with bold policies, and Labour that have nothing to say. So on improving state education, as far as I could tell, Keir Starmer's only policy is to recruit 6,000 or so teachers. There are 23,000 schools in this country. That means that there's about a quarter of a teacher per school. That is not going to be transformative, and that's one of the few things that he was actually able to say would change for the better under Labour. Debates are crystallising moments, and you can tell from the downcast faces of Labour shadow cabinet figures, they recognise that their leader flopped tonight. Their leader was exposed as a dud.
Debates are crystallising moments. What did you think when the issue of national service was brought up and the Tory plans, and the audience seemed to laugh? Did you wince?
No, not at all, because we know that national service is a...
It was laughter of appreciation for policy.
No, I think that in any audience you will have tonight a wide spectrum of opinion, so you will have some people who will be strong Labour supporters, some people will be strong Conservative supporters, and somewhere in between. So, of course, audience reaction in the room reflects that. That is part of what a responsible broadcaster like ITV will do. So it is obvious that, you know, some Labour supporters won't like the idea, and, you know, that's fair enough. It's like a football supporter cheering on his own team or sledging or seeking to undermine the other side. But the substance of the policy commands support across the country.
Final question. What does success look like? Do you think if Rishi Sunak was as good as you claim to our viewers right now, we should see the polls moving in his direction in the next few days?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, commentators can make their own judgments about the polls. We should be making arguments, and arguments on policy. So arguments about process and polling are interesting and fascinating. I won't deny that. But as we move closer and closer to the election, what will matter is the difference. Do you want to have open borders under Keir Starmer, or do you want to have controlled migration with Rishi Sunak? Do you want taxes to go up under Labour or taxes to go down under the Conservatives? That's the choice.
Michael Gove, thank you very much indeed. There we go. You have, in essence, in a nutshell, Cabinet Minister making Rishi Sunak's argument that there is a clear divide and the Labour Party doesn't have a plan. We now have Jonathan Ashworth for Labour, who works in the heart of their campaign operation. Jonathan, it looks from the first snap poll that actually Keir Starmer came out slightly behind tonight. That must worry you.
Well, look, there'll be lots of opinion polls in this election campaign, of course. But we think we are leaving Manchester stronger tonight. And that's because Keir Starmer tonight made clear his commitment to fixing the NHS with 40,000 more appointments every week. He talked about his commitment to bring down energy bills as we transition to clean energy, to transform education for our young people by recruiting more teachers in schools. And we think really the fundamental question remains in this campaign. After 14 years of chaos and decline, do you want to turn the page, and do you want to give Rishi Sunak 5 more years? And I believe in the end the British people will decide that they want to move up, that it is time for change after 14 years.
But isn't the debate that we've just watched likely to reinforce some of the nagging doubts about Keir Starmer, that on really big issues he could just be a bit vague? You can really get to the heart of what he's proposing. I mean, take his answers on the doctor's strike. The answer is, we'll just get round the table. I mean, that's not really an answer to how you stalled and stropped the doctor's strike, is it? Or questions about pensions and whether or not pensioners will be protected from tax rises. Rishi Sunak was...
Rishi Sunak's tax rises.
Well, Rishi Sunak's also proposing to keep pensioners out of...
but he can't explain how he funds it.
But to put up the thresholds. But there is a divide, and there is just when you watch Keir Starmer, sense of him sidestepping some of the difficult questions in order to just try and hope that he can get away without offering too many specifics.
Well, let me be very clear. Let me be clear on one specific. This issue that Rishi Sunak raised about tax, it is a lie, an absolute lie. Keir Starmer said it was absolute garbage. It is. Rishi Sunak had to, out of desperation, collapse into lying in that debate. We do not have a plan to tax households in the way in which Rishi Sunak described. We're not putting up income tax. We're not putting up national insurance. We're not putting up VAT. In fact, the only party that has made a whole scattergun litany of uncosted commitments in this campaign is Rishi Sunak's party. I totted it up, £71 billion, and he cannot explain where the money is coming from. He cannot identify the savings to pay for any one of those pledges. The truth is, it is Rishi Sunak who will put up tax or put up people's mortgages as a consequence of borrowing, just like the Tories have done over the last 14 years.
Jonathan Ashworth, thank you very much indeed. There we go, Anna. You've got a sense of the way that the parties are trying to spin their way through the reception to that debate. My sense is that both men, neither of them look like a particularly edifying spectacle across the just over an hour of that debate. Undoubtedly, Rishi Sunak did land a couple of punches. Keir Starmer managed to ridicule the Prime Minister for his part. Will it dramatically shift opinion? Maybe, maybe not. A very, very narrow victory for Rishi Sunak in that Snap YouGov poll. But will that be enough to transform this election campaign? At the moment, from that debate, it looks hard to say that it will.
Sam Coates weaving us through the reaction there in that spin room after the first of the TV leaders' debate. Sam, thank you very much indeed. So let's get newspaper reaction, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time to see what's making the headlines with the Conservative commentator Tim Montgomery and the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman. Welcome to both of you. Your reaction, first of all, we watched some of it outside, didn't we?
We did.
And your first words were, "This is not edifying," which is something that Sam picked up on.
And I think that's what I talked to a few people on the phone, family, etc. And I think this talking over each other didn't appeal to anyone. And Rishi Sunak was warned about that before. I think if you remember the Tory leadership debates, he talked quite a bit over Liz Truss. I think, for rightly or wrongly, people are more against men talking over women. I don't think that goes down particularly well. Having said all that, though, Anna, I think there is a huge sigh of relief you can hear emanating from Tory HQ tonight. You know, these last couple of days haven't been good for the Conservative Party. Nigel Farage entering the fray. The Tory party is, on average, sort of 20, 25 points behind in opinion polls. And it may only be 2 points, but that Snap poll from YouGov tonight saying that that Rishi Sunak was 2% ahead of Keir Starmer. The Tory party will be holding on to that like a life raft. Oh, and it may not be very much, but when you are as badly knocked about in this race as the Tories have been so far, this little glimmer of hope will just give the Prime Minister a little bit of spring in his step tomorrow.
Yes, there's the question. Leaving aside your own party preference, who do you think performed best overall in tonight's debate? Jenny?
Clinging on to that 2%. I mean, I think people would be less likely to vote after watching that debate, just because
that might be the Tory strategy to press everyone.
It was so frustrating to watch because you had Sunak being, as you would expect, tetchy, talking over Julie Etchingham and Keir Starmer. And then you had Keir Starmer allowing these blows to land, this £2,000 tax rise thing. Over and over again, Sunak was able to say that. And really, Starmer wasn't able to rebut it. He said at one point at the end, this is ridiculous, but we won't go into the details now. It was weak. And Starmer is the one with everything to lose in all of this. But meanwhile, I mean, I did think it was kind of quite desperate from Sunak, a lot of it. I think he mentioned furlough 5 times. He was like, please think of me as Mr. Furlough. You liked me then. Remember that. And this idea, you know, that we're living in these unsafe times. You don't want to be with an unknown quantity in unsafe times. And but he shouldn't have been able to land the blows that he did. And I was quite surprised that he was able to land anything at all, given how uncomfortable he is. They both are so uncomfortable, but given how prone he is to being tetchy and looking like he's not smooth and in control in these debates.
I think you could see who was the person behind in the polls and who was ahead.
Yes.
I think Keir Starmer turned up tonight a little bit, just not to make a mistake.
Yeah.
And therefore he wasn't throwing the punches in the way that Sunak was there, really going for it. He needed to make a difference. And some people will have liked that aggressiveness, some people will have not liked it at all. But you could definitely see who was the person who needed to change the weather today. And it wasn't the Labour leader, it was the Tory leader.
OK, well, let's see how the newspapers reacted, those that maybe adapted their front pages. Finishing only half an hour, it gets quite late for them. Starting with the Daily Mail, then, leading with that first leaders' debate ahead of this year's general election with the headline, Fiery Rishi comes out swinging and lands big blows. Shaky start for Farage, that is on the front of the Metro, after the Reform UK leader had a milkshake thrown over him while launching his personal election campaign in Clacton in Essex. Financial Times reporting on Indian voters delivering a shock to Prime Minister Narendra Modi as the ruling party failed to win a majority in the elections there. The Mirror marks the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings. And on the front of the Star, killer whales that attack boats are not aggressive, but just bored teens, according to new research. Well, a reminder, by scanning the QR code, you can see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. Still some coming in, as you might have gathered from that. But let's head back to Tim Montgomery and Jenny Kleeman. Didn't catch the mail, let's see it now. Fiery Rishi comes out swinging and lands big blows.
I did not land big blows. I think this was, as I said, this is...
Are you saying the Daily Mail isn't telling the whole truth, Jenny? I can't believe it.
They had to write the headline quite quickly.
I mean... There were audible groans when he was talking about the NHS, and he was saying, yes, of course, COVID and the strikes have meant that that things are terrible. And when he made that, it was ridiculous, the thing that he was saying about the waiting lists, that they'd be going down when they were demonstrably not going down. You know, he didn't land big blows. I think this was Starmer's to lose, and it's more that Starmer wasn't really able to fight back when Rishi Sunak was saying things that are demonstrably false. I mean, you saw Jonathan Edwards there better able to rebut it than Keir Starmer. Jonathan Ashworth, yes. You know, and this was really worrying, really. It was, you know, all of these things, the debate, it's almost like they assume that most people aren't going to be watching all of it. It's all about clips, what's going to be clipped up and put on social media, what's going to be clipped up and put on the news. All that stuff about waiting lists in the NHS, would you go private? And Rishi Sunak saying, yes, I would go private. Keir Starmer saying, no. These are things that they will, you know, that they will be gripping hold of. But watching the entire thing, I found it really frustrating. I wish there was something a bit better in our politics than these things.
But is that a format issue? Many people suggesting, once again, it's too short. And we've had this before. The time constraints, nobody finishes a sentence. No thought is properly conceived and therefore cannot be explained properly. So, you know, is there an element of that about it, do you think?
I'm sure there is. And I think we live in a soundbite age, and I'm afraid we had the soundbite debate.
Keep it short.
Tonight.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, sorry. Where I thought Rishi, and it's not in the Mail particularly, although they've got the £2,000 thing here. Now, I think this is the beginning of what I hope, from a Conservative analyst perspective, is going to be a huge Conservative campaign. And Jenny and you might, and all viewers might be about to be really bored of this. But up until now, I think the Conservatives have been saying, Labour have no plan. I think that's not been a sensible strategy. You're not going to frighten voters by saying Labour have no plan. The Tories are not going to change perceptions of themselves over the next few weeks. People have made their decision about the Conservatives after 14 years in power. What the Conservatives have an opportunity in the remainder of the election campaign is to attach a price tag to Labour, to say, do you really think that Labour are going to come into power after having criticised the underfunding of the NHS, underfunding of schools, underfunding of police, and not put up your taxes? Every Labour government in history has raised taxes.
Well, and they're now in their DNA.
In their DNA. And the Conservative Party, a slightly odd advert I've seen tonight with a sort of pig flying over a cityscape. But I think this is the number you're going to hear again and again now. Labour are going to raise your taxes by £2,000.
It's gone from Labour don't have a plan to Labour have a cunning plan.
A secret plan.
And we have costed the secret plan. And Starmer was really thrown by this.
And he shouldn't have been.
But the other thing is, also, he was trying to respond. Julie Etchingham was stopping him. He was frustrated by that. But, you know, there are many places where he could have come back. And he was weak when he was saying, we won't go into the details, but that's ridiculous. You must go into the details.
I mean, you make a good point. Let's take a look at The Guardian, if we've got a leaders' clash on migration, tax and the NHS, an ill-tempered debate. Is there no point doing this till we get the manifestos? Are we just... Is it all too early? I mean, the chat was that Labour's might be back end of next week.
That is such a good point. I'm old enough to remember manifestos basically came at the start of the campaigns. It used to be... when I worked for Tory HQ in 2001, we produced our manifesto 48 hours after Tony Blair called the election. And then, you know, people like you, Anna, have the opportunity for the whole of the campaign to grill politicians on what their promises are. I think we're deliberately letting politicians off the hook, really, delaying their manifestos until, I think it's still a week or so away for either of the parties.
I heard June the 13th, but I don't think it's been confirmed, has it?
But that means that they can, you know, they can sort of stymie debate until those manifesto launches happen. And only then can we start to cost proposals and grill them properly. And I think we should be a little bit angrier about that than we are.
That's tomorrow's job, right?
Okay. I get very frustrated by the bludgeoning of these catchphrases over and over again. We've got to turn the page. We've got to turn the page on part of Starmer. And then also Sunak completely, he hasn't got a plan. And now that's that's shifting it into something else.
Because not many messages land, and I think they've worked that out over the years, haven't they?
It's so depressing if you really are looking for ideas. We are at a critical point in this country where we need a breath of something new, and it is very disappointing that all we're getting is these messages and sound bites over and over again. And yes, I think if we did have these manifestos, we could actually talk about points of detail.
Yeah, or election moments, which we'll come on to, obviously, which is Nigel Farage and a milkshake, isn't it? So plenty more reaction to that debate and what else happened as well. Mr Farage in Clacton, as you'll know.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
They have breached the road. There is a lot of gas being fired all around us.
शांति से इनको समझाओ वरना ये हम लोग
It is an absolute carnival kind of atmosphere out here for Prime Minister Modi's decisive victory. These students are defying the prohibitory orders, and now they're going to be arrested. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. What is feared that over 200 people might have died because of these landslides. This on any given day would have been bustling with people, but today it's absolutely deserted. This is one of the most sensitive areas of northeast Delhi where there's been clashes. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
Well, welcome back. You're watching our press preview. Bit of haphazard tonight because we're reacting slowly to things, aren't we? The Conservative commentator Tim Montgomery's here and the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman. Another paper in, The Eye, which is also leading on the first of the TV debates for this election, 2024 election, Ignite during angry TV clash. Ignite suggests it was a good thing we saw there, Jenny,
I don't feel it ignited. It was certainly angry. I felt angry watching it.
Interesting, they're sort of picking up on Jenny's theme as well. Starmer is slow to deny Sunak's claim about £2,000 tax hikes. I think Labour will regret that. This, as I'm trying to argue, is going to be the big Tory tax line. And the fact that Keir Starmer didn't sort of slap it down immediately, that was That was disappointing on the Labour, from a Labour point of view.
It was weak on the part of Keir Starmer. He should have.
I mean, it's interesting to see their, snap headlines as they do with the Eye. Ill-tempered contest. Starmer slow to deny the 2000 tax hike claim. Prime Minister is jeered by studio audience for his false claim that NHS waiting lists are falling. Clapped, though, to be fair, when he said, I'm not giving taxpayers money for that 35% demand from junior doctors. Snap poll on which of them won, that YouGov poll, which we reported first, Sunak edging it 51% to 49%. They also clashed on state pensions, immigration, human rights, schools and building homes. Meantime, we'll go ahead to the Metro, which is the shaky start for Farage. Certainly the Eye had suggested he was first mobbed and then shaken, Tim.
Yeah, well, look, I think Jenny and I might agree on this. It was only a milkshake today, but it could have been so much worse. And I know a lot of candidates, a lot of MPs, or former MPs now, who do worry an awful lot about their safety, of themselves and their family. And Farage, I think, initially made a little light about this, but in an interview that's appeared later on this evening, he was sort of saying, he was asked about this, and he said, actually, it does worry him. He does think about it a lot. And I think we just had the Mexican elections where I think 37 candidates were murdered. And so we're not in that league, but we have lost Joe Cox and David Amis, in recent years. The security of our candidates is a big issue, and I would like to see a proper punishment of this woman. Maybe it was only a milkshake, but I think we need to send a message out to everyone. If you invade someone, if you basically assault them, if you're frightening our elected representatives, it's unacceptable. Hurl abuse, say what you like, but when you start to use a physical attack like this, I think it's unacceptable. We need to send the clearest message that's unacceptable.
And if only Nigel Farage hadn't then put a video out saying, my milkshake brings all the people to the rally, as he did. He was making light of it. I would agree that, you shouldn't physically attack anybody in public life. You shouldn't throw eggs at the king. You shouldn't throw milkshakes at Nigel Farage. I do think he is an incredible opportunist, and if I lived in Clacton or was part of this constituency, I have relatives of mine who are in that constituency, I'd be incredibly frustrated at having him manipulate this for his own pure personal brand.
But you wouldn't dare do anything like that, would you?
Of course not. No. You don't need to do something like that. But, this has been a boring election campaign so far, apart from him and the milkshake and Diane Abbott. That's been it.
Jenny, Tim, for now, thank you very much indeed. More reaction to the spin room coming up at the top of the hour.